but there was an occasional flash of a scythe as a haymaker worked on a small plot. The thought of him standing on the edge of a dizzy drop made the girl shudder, as if a sudden gust of wind had caught at her, and she closed her eyes for an instant to shut out the bright glare. The dark woods, the silver streams like ribbons running down from the heights, and above all, the peaks themselves, aloof, majestic, but cruel, utterly indifferent to human frailty. She had been so eager to get nearer to them, and now, with their light powdering of snow that had survived the blistering heat of summer, they kept advancing and retreating, as if they were part of a swaying backcloth. The man on the ledge called down to her clearly, "What are you afraid of?" Toni's heart lurched with surprise, and then she dared to put back her head and gaze up at him. He was coolly smoking his cigarette a dozen or so feet above her, and although it was a much more perilous ledge than the green island to which she clung, he was obviously quite unaffected by any sensation of height. He was lying on one elbow, a pack beside him, and a lizard, or something that looked like a lizard, kept darting about the rock above his head. Toni's eyes grew wide, fascinated as much by the lizard as the complete sang-froid of the man. He didn't look as if he wanted to be of any assistance to her. He was smiling sleepily, his teeth very even and white in the blinding sunshine, his face dark and tanned. His hair was thick and black, with an inclination to wave crisply. "You've got plenty of room," he informed her conversationally. "Stand up and walk around on the inside of that boulder, and then get back up onto the path." "I can't," she gulped. "Yes, you can. Can't is a futile word when you've got as far as this. What do you imagine you're going to do? Remain where you are all night? It's cold in the mountains once the sun has set." The sheer brutality of his tone struck through her fears and aroused her indignation. What sort of a human being was he, she wondered, when he must be perfectly well aware that she was petrified by the very thought of moving? If he wanted to give her confidence, all he had to do was join her on the plateau, and then perhaps she would find enough courage to stand up, although the very thought of it caused her to avert her face hurriedly from the valley. If only she had a hand to cling on to. But it was plain he had no intention of joining her on the plateau, and instead he continued to give her advice as to the best method of evacuating her impossible position. His voice was inhumanly cool. She had a curious conviction that he was actually enjoying her predicament, and by degrees that very inhuman jibing quality that made his faintly accented English seem like a deliberate attack on her helplessness, so grated on every sensitive nerve she possessed that a kind of desperation seized her, and she began to crawl forward inch by inch across the plateau. She didn't care to stand up until she reached the slight protection of the boulder, and then when she did so, her knees were knocking so badly and her pulses hammering so loudly in her ears that she was hardly aware of what she was doing, or what she ought to do next. She stood clinging on to the boulder until the advancing and retreating wall of mountains stopped advancing and retreating, and then she set her teeth, partly closed her eyes, and groped blindly for the path. And no sooner had she reached the doubtful sanctuary of it than her tormentor dropped lightly down and stood beside her. "Well done," he said. He surveyed her white face and pallid lips and nodded approvingly. "Quite well done." He took her by the arm and almost thrust her forward along the path until a small outcrop of pine trees encroached on it, and then she once more found herself lying supine, but this time amongst pine needles, with straight trunks rising all around her. A lit cigarette was placed between her inert fingers, and the cap of a brandy flask unscrewed. "I don't suppose you're used to raw spirit," the voice that had so tantalized her observed calmly. "But it's what you need at the moment. So take a cautious swig, and then lie still and get your breath." "Thank you," she muttered faintly, when she had recovered from the suffocating sensation of downing a mouthful of neat brandy. The man with the brown face and the brown eyes. They were like brown, lustrous, somewhat derisive velvet, she decided, when she at last gazed into them, lit himself a cigarette and sat smoking it.